The sound I just played for you is a sound that still jolts a feeling of uneasiness and maybe a slight amount of fear coursing through me to this day. It's rather telling at first, due to the fact that it just sounds so unique. It's not the average menu select noise or game start sound that welcomes you, but rather something completely the opposite. It alienates you totally, right off the jump. It's a noise that feels so unnatural, a noise that when you hear it you probably can't even begin to picture in your brain what the thought process had to have contained that was responsible for even creating it. The sound, of course, as I'm sure you know from the title, if nothing else, belongs to Konami's Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill as a franchise has always been pretty good at making the player uncomfortable with its ambience alone. Whenever you're not indoors, the town of Silent Hill is a place that's completely shrouded in nothing but mystery, misery, and loneliness. As a man in my 20s, going back and playing a game like this, as opposed to my younger self playing it for the first time, you'd think the experience simply gets less scary and more nostalgic. Well, that's where you would be wrong. Silent Hill 2 still terrifies me to this day. It's a feeling that if you were to ask someone to describe, they'd most certainly, well, they'd definitely struggle, but they'd all loop around to tell you something like, well, it's just creepy, I guess, or, something like that. And that's because the game is just a deeply personal experience. No one take on it will be the same. Silent Hill 2 is by no manner of means an easy game to play, which is just so strange to me because, well, the game is very old now and the controls are pretty dated when it comes to today's standards, offering little to no challenge. But as you progress and start playing through the game, you come to notice that the challenge isn't in the gameplay itself, but rather trying to get through the story itself with how grim and harrowing it can be at times. To get our quick story summary out of the way, Silent Hill 2 follows our protagonist, James Sunderland, a man who's received a letter from his wife, Mary, telling him to meet her at their, quote, special place. This puzzles James, however, due to the fact that Mary has been dead for 3 years due to a life-threatening degenerative disease. So, James decides to pluck up the courage, or, well, what little courage he seems to have left, whether that be out of desperation or a feeling of, well, nothingness, and makes his way to the town Silent Hill. In this video, it's my goal to not give the average retrospective on the series cloaked by what looks like the advertisement of an analysis piece, but share my personal experience with the game and the layer of fear that it so nonchalantly provides to a player, and maybe even do my best to explain why I personally find Silent Hill 2 so scary, and maybe why you, questionably, fear it so much, whether you're a seasoned adult or a younger player that just finished the game. There will be spoilers in this video covering the main story beats and reveals of Silent Hill 2, so if you care about those, I suggest you probably watch this at a later date, and if you don't, well, get comfortable, because Silent Hill 2 is bland, and that is horrifying. I originally was going to make this video about purely the characters in Silent Hill 2 that we come across, but I thought to myself, however, there's no scarier character in the game, or in the series for that matter, than the town itself. See, in Silent Hill 2, we're treated to a very interesting take on the town compared to most other looks that we have of it in the franchise, and that look here is bland. That, however, is my favourite part. I think the illusion that Silent Hill 2 creates when it comes to the town may be the perfect depiction of it, due to the fact that much like how the game treats James, it's a blank slate. You can't read anything at all from the setting to deduce what type of experience that you're in for. Now, with other games, we'll use Resident Evil as an example. You might see that comparison a lot. You have Raccoon City, a place that is basically marketed in the games as the war zone to be at if you're into killing a bunch of zombies. The game rewards the player with bombastic action set pieces and intense gameplay. Why is it so intense? Because the stakes are high. You don't know how you're going to come out of this alive. It's just you and one more bullet in the chamber, and when you go to take the last shot, you... This is what intensity feels like. At least it did to me, anyway. See, the town of Silent Hill in the game's second entry is a very boring and lifeless place. The creatures that roam the streets can easily be run past without even touching you in the slightest, and besides a very indirect map for video game standards, you're left lost like a madman trying to figure out where you have to be next. Yet, as you progress, you find this to be both far more terrifying and intriguing than your average horror experience. This is made possible by both the uninteresting, abandoned-looking buildings, but by the fog itself. Back in 1996, development of the first Silent Hill game was facing some, we'll say issues very early on. According to Akira Yamaoka, renowned composer for the Silent Hill games, the core development staff apparently had no clue what on earth they even wanted to do at first, stating that they simply did not know how to proceed. With early on development, Konami were starting to lose faith in the then dubbed Team Silent, which led them to feel pressured and like outcasts in their own line of work. They eventually decided, however, to press on, regardless of what the parent company's thoughts of them were, and instead of trying to fit into the genre of action horror games that were taking the gaming world by storm at the time, they opted for a emotionally driven experience. Their visions had gotten big for the game. Too big, in fact, for even the console they were creating the title for. So, as a way to work around this, the fog was born. This very dramatic sounding, I know, but the fog was implemented as a way to hide actively loading textures from rendering in front of the player's eyes, and it was then that they truly settled on the idea of the fear of the unknown approach, with not only their scare tactics, but as a general story beat. I think the culminations of their struggles in the past came together to conceive Silent Hill 2 very well, considering that that's exactly what Silent Hill 2 is, both as a story and as an experience. It's nothing. It is the unknown. I think looking at Silent Hill 2, Team Silent had a striking amount of confidence with how they were going to handle treating the player as opposed to their first attempt with Silent Hill 1. The game offers little to nothing when it comes to set pieces, eye candy, or iconography. The genius of it is that without even trying, which is clearly done on purpose with the town, they've created something so brain-piercing and memorable out of the unknown, out of the bland, I should say. All you have ahead of you is blank. It's an abyss. You have nothing to be excited for as you push forward, and that is simply the most genius part of the setting. The fear that lies in the fact that you have no idea what you're in for. You simply don't know what to expect due to how mundane and bland the setting actually is. It's not only the town, however, that reflects this dull marvel, it's the cast of characters too. Most notably, our main one, James Sunderland. From the intro alone, you can clearly see here what tone the game is trying to set for the player. You're not in for a jump scare fest or a Resident Evil style action blaster horror experience. You are here to feel alone, threatened by that same loneliness, and question every move you make because of the feeling of indirect, raw isolation the game presents you with. Yes, Silent Hill 2 has an incredible cast of well-written side characters with horrific tales and experiences of their own, which I will touch up upon, but with how their interactions with James are, the player begins to deduce that there's no real sincerity in their conversations with James, creating an even thicker layer of isolation. Interestingly enough though, that is none of the faults of the opposing cast, but rather James himself. Let's take the first interaction with another person in the town, for example, Angela Orozco. When you meet Angela, you can clearly tell she's on edge and very distraught. She seems quite loose in the brain. Ordinarily, as a main character and as the person you're playing as, it's the duty of James to try and point you into the correct direction with how to feel about this interaction, yet you're left confused with what you witness here. James doesn't come off as empathetic or concerned or annoyed or literally anything else. He feels like a husk of a man, like you're almost trying to watch someone understand how to feel towards Angela right before your very eyes.
It's kind of hard to explain, but...
Is it dangerous?
Maybe. And it's not just the fog, either.
Okay, I got it. I'll be careful.
I'm not lying.
No, I believe you. It's just... I guess I really don't care if it's dangerous or not.
The voice acting of Guy Seehee here even highlighting that to a very standout degree with how plastic the performance sounds, which I have no doubt in my mind was in fact intentional. All this adds to my point of view as a player feeling completely alone here. The main character won't even serve as a guide as to how you should feel in certain situations, thus creating some sort of weird fourth wall breaking sense of dreadful isolation that's made by James being so purposefully planned that it locks you out of feeling anything towards him as a character. A lot of you might just say that this is bad character writing, but even if that may be the case, it definitely worked in the favour of Konami and Team Silent because it simply makes you feel lonely, and that's something you really don't want to be feeling while playing a horror game, if you ask me, especially one like this. One of my favourite aspects of Silent Hill 2 is how different its methods are in scaring the player compared to the other 3 entries, making Team Silent's quadrilogy of games in the franchise. Silent Hill was clearly made with the idea of a sort of cultist-style horror in mind. The story and the rest of the games very clearly reflect that. Silent Hill 2, however, sticks out like a needle in a haystack, purely due to the fact that it's not like the others at all. It's very much a psychological horror dealing with lots of very real issues that its cast all take turns in depicting and displaying, whether it be Angela, a woman who's so troubled by the abuse she was put through by her brother and father that even as an adult all she seems to want to do is find and be with her mother to feel safe. Or another one of the supporting characters, Eddie Drombowski, who was bullied and pushed around so much in his life that he broke down and had to resort to killing people that wronged him just to feel at peace. And of course, wrapping back around to James, who feels empty, desperate, and again alone after the tragic passing of his wife. So much so that he starts seeing a warped version of her in the form of a hallucination just to cope with her loss. Now, do I think every character in the game deserves a deep dive explanation piece? No, of course not. Besides, most people who are fans of the game will tell you that that's been done so much already. Sometimes the characters have even been over-analysed in my opinion. However, the 2 most important characters to focus on are James, of course, and Maria. Maria is the tainted hallucination of Mary that Silent Hill creates for James as he makes his way through the town, and for the most part, her and James get on pretty well together. You can notice in their conversations that unlike with other characters, James feels a lot more natural when speaking with Maria. Maria, however, opens lots of mental doors for the player to feel very strange or put off as they progress, due to the fact that Maria herself is made to constantly have the player questioning their actions as James, or better put, constantly have the player question James as a person. Before it's revealed that James is in fact the cause of his wife Mary's death by having smothered her with a pillow, the player is meant to have no idea of how to perceive James as a person, further backing up my point about him feeling very one-note and bland on purpose. Maria is the only link we have to let us inside the mind of James because, well, in a way, she is James' mind. The town created Maria for James to make him feel guilty for what he did to his wife Mary, as it did Pyramid Head, and the naturality of their conversations compared to other characters highlights this strongly. Like here, and the interaction between the two in the fucking back rooms with Maria taunting and trying to seduce James.
Maria?
You said you took everything, but you forgot that videotape we made. I wonder if it's still there.
How do you know about that? Aren't you Maria?
I'm not your Mary.
So, you're Maria?
I am. If you want me to be.
All I want from you is an answer.
It doesn't matter who I am. I'm here for you, James. See? I'm real.
It's actually a very unsettling clip that has a layer of genuine emotion behind it, yet feels so dream-like, as if it's doing its hardest to imitate what a real heartfelt conversation between two people would sound like, but fails, in a sense that there's such a hollow feeling in their dialogue. Hello, this is Sam from the future. As I'm editing this video, I kinda wanted to put a little bit of highlight on that specific scene, especially this area here where we get this blank sort of state on Maria's face, and that in of itself is fucking terrifying to me. Every time I watch this clip, every time I go back and play the game, it's that specific moment in the cutscene that genuinely kind of almost sends a shiver down my spine with how just bland and blank Maria actually is, as if she's nothing. Her brain has been completely shut off and she's on autopilot. You can tell by her facial expressions, and I don't really know if it's made up purely by the shading on her face, making it sort of look like a dark figure, but just the overall tone and the bland aspect of what's going on, especially within her mannerisms, it's very, very fucking scary. The game does its damn best to make you feel connected to this lady. From the moment you meet her, you're essentially tasked with keeping her safe, and yes, it does feel like a chore at first, but as you keep going, her almost warm, well, raunchy and somewhat light-hearted personality makes you fully realise that out of everyone you've met in the town thus far, she is your only comfort due to how real she feels in a town made up of nothing but lies and manipulation. In turn, this makes you truly realise every so often that yes, you are playing as a human being. James feels the most real he seems all game when you communicate with her. It's key that we pay attention to Maria's behaviour throughout the game, due to the fact that yes, while she is an illusion of the town, she also very clearly is supposed to display traits of Mary and how Mary treated James as a wife, especially through the period in their marriage in which she had gotten sick. It's this further lack of understanding of its cast that Team Silent provide that shines through here very brightly, seeing as they leave it entirely up to the player to forge their own narrative when it comes to James and Mary's life, prior to her death, using Maria as a hint or a guide to form your opinion. Her behaviour is always changing. Her personality is always taking flips. She seems so much like Mary one moment and a completely different person the next. And even here, for example, when she quite, well, rightly, but randomly lashes out at James for almost brushing the danger she was in off like it was nothing to him.
James!
Mary? Oh, Maria. It's you. I thought you were... Sorry. Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? You don't sound very happy to see me. I was almost killed back there. Why didn't you try to save me? All you care about is that dead wife of yours. I've never been so scared in my whole life. You couldn't care less about me, could you?
No, I
Then
just...
stay with me. Don't ever leave me alone. You're supposed to take care of me. So, what about Laura? Did you find her?
This to me is seriously just impressive, is it not? The fact that the player can feel so unsettled thanks to actual emotionally driven moments and acting, as opposed to a sense of irregularity and nothingness. When hundreds of horror games try to freak the player out by making them feel like they're losing everything and going deeper into a respective world of fear, Silent Hill 2 does the complete opposite and starts the player off in that fear-driven husk of a setting and makes them feel so alone, vulnerable, and lost that just the random, unpredictable showing of genuine emotion from character to character is enough to make you feel scared or threatened. I know it might seem like I'm practically begging for a bottle of lube for all the fucking dick riding I'm doing here, but I mean it seriously. Using Maria as a constant setup to make the game feel unpredictable with how James is going to act and how to treat a situation with how fearful you should really be of it is absolutely genius, considering what we went over previously with how James is written to feel like he's basically a walking nothing. I sometimes can't get over how Silent Hill 2 uses a bland approach in order to appreciate and make people understand what true fear actually is. You come to find that with a lot of horror games, at least nowadays, that is, even back then, they took horror as an idea of frightening the player, of giving them a scare, a spook. But with Silent Hill 2, it put its foot down and said, no, this is what fear is. Fear is loneliness, fear is abandonment, fear is regret, it's a overwhelming sense of emotional turmoil, and there's nothing you can do about it. I appreciate that a lot from Silent Hill 2. I appreciate that Silent Hill 2 took steps that a lot of horror games didn't take at the time and focused on a emotionally driven setting in order to make the player feel fear that they never really thought they could actually feel from a video game, let alone any piece of fictional media. Like I said, I know I may sound like I'm giving Silent Hill 2 the big gold star and essentially decorating the piece, but I'm very serious, at least in my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of people can agree. Silent Hill 2 is a very, very special project to have been given to us. I fear it, I feel uncomfortable by it, and I most certainly do indeed debate on replaying it with how unsettling I find it at times, but I appreciate it and I thank it for just being there, because through all of the fear and the pain, the frightening sense of reality that the game slaps you with sometimes, even though it's set in such a dreamlike, bland setting, it's special. It speaks to you, it drives you in with how real some of these characters feel regardless of the lack of emotion that they tend to show, and that is so genius to me. I think that's all I have to say on the matter. I think that's all I have to say about Silent Hill 2, at least for now, until the remake comes out. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you later.
You'd better do something about